Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you the latest insights, thought leadership and stories from across the global mining industry. In today's show, I'm joined by Elvis Kamba, who's the author of the new book, Mark Bristow, An Extraordinary Rise of Randgold Resources. Elvis worked inside Randgold and later Barrick under Bristow's leadership, giving him a unique front row perspective on one of the most influential mining stories of the last 30 years. In this conversation, we're just going to explore what inspired Elvis to capture the Randgold journey, how Bristow's leadership philosophy shaped the company, what made Randgold's approach to Africa so different from everyone else. We're also going to dive into the pivotal moments from Morila, the company maker, to the hard lessons of Syama and the engineering triumph of Kibali, and ultimately the merger of the century with Barrick. Elvis is going to reflect on Randgold's culture, its ability to build elite teams and its relationship with governments and communities, and the broader message he wants the industry and young professionals to take away from his book. It's a rare inside look at one of mining's most remarkable success stories. So let's get stuck into this straight away. So Elvis, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, and thank you for your time. And obviously, I saw a few of your posts on LinkedIn advertising. Obviously, you're going to be at the time launching of a new book, which was obviously focusing on Mark Bristow. So before we go into the details of the book, I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career, and how your career has sort of developed over the years. And if you want to start from when you were how you got into the mining industry and obviously then through your education and then getting into the industry. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. And I've had quite a dynamic career, but of course I'll start from the origin of it all. I was born in a mining town, which of course made it actually very natural for me to gravitate towards the mining industry. So I grew up in a town called Luansha. It's a small mining town in Zambia, and it's predominantly known for mining. So when mining activities go down, the lives of the people also go down. If it's the other way around, the lives of the people also, improve. So we had a very close link to the mining industry. And thereon, I went to high school, and I was lucky enough to be selected to attend the Copperbelt University, where I managed to do a degree in mining engineering. It's at that stage that I was clear of exactly what I wanted to do. And later on, I started my career at a mine called First Quantum in Zambia. It's quite a popular mine across the globe. And thereafter, I did a bit of training in other fields. That's mostly to do with management and mining particularly. And at some point, of course, in my career, I was lucky enough to join a company called Randgold. I think it was in the early 2010s, somewhere there, going to 2011, 2012. Yeah. So having joined that company, I actually joined them in an operation which was based in Ivory Coast. It was called Tongon Gold Mine. And, the most interesting part was that it was the first time, of course, previously I'd worked with other companies, other mining companies, but the most exciting time was when I joined the company called Randgold. And what I found was that in this company, we had the opportunity to be at the forefront of the mining operations and the activities. But again, I thought like I lacked in some of the skills. So I decided to do a program at the Harvard Business School, a certificate in management, accounting, and business analytics. So this was critical in the position that I was holding at the time. And it's from there that I started growing in the company. So basically, I grew within Randgold, starting as a mining engineer, all the way to chief mining engineer, up to the time I became the mine manager for the Tanzania operation. But all that happened when I was when we transitioned to Barrick. So it was a combination of Randgold and Barrick, all put together. Yes.
Right, great. So obviously I mentioned about the book. What inspired you to write a book about Mark Bristow and the rise of Randgold?
So I'll take you back again to my first encounter with Mark Bristow. That's the first time I joined Randgold. That was in Tongon Gold Mine. And so in the company, we used to have what we used to call strat sessions. And every year, the company used to hold this strat session in different operations. So I was lucky enough that year, the strat session was happening in Tongon Gold Mine, and Mark Bristow was present with a number of executives. So when I listened to his way of approach in terms of how he looked at mining as a business, but not only as a business, but also as an opportunity for the country to transform itself, that included the people and the communities around. I looked at him and I said, I think this is a leader I would like to follow. And that was quite inspiring. And that also made me stay with the company longer, because I spent about more than 10 years with the company. So it was at that time that my interest and my curiosity to listen and follow Mark Bristow's leadership. So, everybody knows Mark Bristow is one of the most transformational leaders in the industry. And look, this is a guy who started a mine with a minimum of about $10 million and built an empire which was worth $6 billion. And through the cycle and the operation of Randgold, the company grew so much that it attracted interest of other companies like Barrick, and Mark Bristow managed to pull up a major of what I'm calling in the book that it's the major of the century, where Randgold brought about $6 billion as its market capitalization, and Barrick brought $18 billion to the table, and altogether they managed to constitute about $24 billion. So for me, the inspiration from Mark came from the fact that working with him closely, he had an inherent interest, not in particularly the shareholders alone, but he also had an inherent interest for the country and the people that were in the places where he did the business. So if you look at the culture of Randgold, it was people-centric, and that was driven all by Mark Bristow himself. So this is a leader that was inspirational throughout my career working with the company. And when the time came for the merger to take place, it was a wake-up call to state that perhaps some of the culture and the disciplines that we acquired in Randgold may be lost. So it's at that time that I made a decision to say, perhaps we need to kind of document this information. So that was around 2018. And that's when I started writing the book. But through 2018 to 2022, that's the transitional period. So 2018, 2019, Randgold merged with Barrick. And throughout that time, I was still working with the company and had the opportunity to be able to put together all this information and be able to constitute a book. So I had the first-hand privilege of talking to the executives, the colleagues that I was working with, as well as some of the community members around some of our interesting operations. But also I extended that to, people like government officials to try and understand what impact the company had on these groups. But more also, I also talked to the contractors who were part of our business model, and went further to also talk to academicians to just try to understand what was the perception that they had for the company. Put all that together, I realized that there's something interesting here that would be beneficial to the larger group or to the larger population out there, to be able to understand the impact of mining and the beauty that mining brings to nations, especially, developing or emerging economies, and mostly Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. And how was your relationship with Mark? Obviously, more so once you started writing the book, and obviously he was aware that you were making a book around him. How was your relationship with him? And I suppose how close did you get to really get an insight to his life and his work?
So Mark is a very open-minded person, and one interesting thing is that he encouraged everybody in the team to first of all work hard and to deliver on the company's promises. But he was closer to us. He was closer to me. He was closer to everybody that was in key positions to be able to guide us in a direction that we were able to deliver on the promises of the company. So the beautiful thing about Mark was that when I mentioned the idea of writing the book, I think it didn't occur to him to interfere in the work or the input. So he kind of like just gave me a free hand to be able to put together what I thought would be good for the public consumption. Yeah.
How would you describe Mark Bristow's leadership philosophy? I suppose in simple terms.
Yeah, like I said from my introduction, Mark Bristow is a leader that represents one of the most transformational leadership. And if you look at the mining industry, there are quite a few leaders like Mark Bristow. And if there's any match, I match him with a guy like Mark Tiffany, who is another phenomenal leader. So, and when you just dive deep into Mark Bristow's journey, when he started as a geologist, as a young geologist in South Africa, and he managed to galvanize a team of experts to be able to start a company like Randgold, and it all started like an exploration. It started as an exploration company, and eventually grew into an operating mine, and a number of mines were opened across the globe. So Mark Bristow is a leader that inspires a lot of people. He personally inspired me to greater lengths, and I witnessed firsthand the culture, the discipline, and the relentless pursuit of excellence within the organization. So when I took up this project to put together this book, my focus wasn't only to capture the developments that we did in the mining space, but also it was about the leadership that he exudes to the larger majority of us, and of course the people out there. And his focus was mainly on people and particularly building nations. So in Mark's philosophy, he strongly believed that for a continent like Africa, with its vast resources, he believed that that's the only way we could swim our way out of the challenges that Africa faces. So, in a sense, I would put that Mark Bristow's model of mining should be the blueprint for Africa's future. Yeah.
And what made, I suppose, his approach to Africa different from some of the other mining CEOs out there?
If you look on a larger scale, in Africa, the kind of perception that most Africans have towards these large corporations, they always feel that they come to Africa, and rob us of the resource that we have, and the God-given resource. That's how they put it. And they always try to point out that all these challenges that are in Africa, which actually makes Africa a very, unpopular destination for most investment. And yet Mark looked at it differently. Where other people saw political instabilities, infrastructure challenges, for Mark, he saw opportunities not only for the investors, but also for the local people of those jurisdictions. So what's amazing about Mark was that he believed that Africa wasn't a problem as the general perception of most corporations out there. He believed that Africa is a place where one can invest and flourish as a company, but also help, lift the many lives of people in the continent. So, what differentiated Mark was that he had a deep interest in the people of Africa, and his interest was not particularly to make a profit alone, but was also to build lives and also to empower communities. Through that, he managed to negotiate directly with the governments and invest heavily in communities, which was quite interesting. Yeah. So in one of his statements, I think I quoted him in the book, where he said that every time you built a mine in Africa and created a job, you actually had the opportunity to liberate an African person or a person economically and politically, which is the biggest challenge that we have in Africa. So yeah, so that's that the mindset that set Randgold and Mark Bristow apart.
In the book, Morila Gold Mine is described as the company maker. Why was Morila so transformational?
So remember, Morila, Randgold only managed to get started with Morila after, having a hard time at Syama Gold Mine. So Syama in itself was a very challenging project, and pretty much Randgold was almost about to tank, trying to, work Morila out. Fortunately, through Mark Bristow's ingenuity and creativity, there's an interesting story in the book that you'll find about how he discovered Morila, because at some point it was almost a failed project, but with Mark's intuition and geological, skills and his ability to differentiate, the best projects to the ones that were not economically viable, he managed to revisit Morila and, of course, set it on a course of project development. So basically, Morila was the Randgold's first world-class deposit. It had one of the best grades you could ever, talk about in the industry, and in a lot of ways, Morila transformed what was known as a small exploration company at the time, Randgold, into a globally respected producer. And Morila is defined as a company maker in one of my chapters, basically because it managed to generate massive cash flows, and these cash flows are the ones that set the company on the expedition to expand and explore further and build other mines that came after that. So Morila was quite an interesting project. Yeah, sure.
I suppose following on from this, one of the most powerful sections of your book is obviously at Syama. What did that failure teach Randgold as a company?
So I think Syama, in my own imagination, I look at it as the as the light at the end of the tunnel. They may have not looked at it like that, but Syama was like a crucible where, Randgold's ability to manage the future mines that came were sort of forged. So with the challenges that Syama brought to Randgold, the company managed to strengthen its environmental and social capabilities, because they face all sorts of challenges in that space. And then because of the other challenges in terms of economics, remember at the time, the gold price was sitting at around $250 and the costs were around $300. So if you look at that, it was a very tight project. And this is when Randgold started trying to figure out how they can refine their cost controls and develop that discipline to manage costs efficiently. So it's at Syama, that Randgold learned to do all that stuff, and through Syama they developed a smarter project selection framework, which they popularly called our filters, as in the Randgold filters. So for every project that Randgold was doing some exploration on, they kind of developed some filters. So these filters help them to get rid of certain projects and choose certain sort of projects. So it's through the Syama, learnings that Randgold refined its management and leadership abilities. Yeah.
Kibali in the DRC is one of the most challenging mining environments on the earth. How did Randgold actually pull that off?
Kibali is one other challenging project. The biggest challenge about Kibali was mostly to do with the region where this mine was particularly located. So this is a region which was previously and historically infested with a lot of wars and atrocities. But at the time Randgold entered that region, the war had come to an end, and the country was looking to rebuild itself. But as you always know, where there are these challenges of war and atrocities in a region, there's always a lack of infrastructure. There's always a lack of development, and there's always a challenge of skills development. So when Randgold took up the Kibali project, it faced all sorts of challenges in those areas, and among them was a lack of proper infrastructure, such as proper road networks to be able to transport some of their heavy equipment, and issues of power generation, and also the the skills required to be able to drive the mine to profitability. So Randgold had to deal with all these issues, and then to convince shareholders to get into such a region was also a bit of a challenge. But in any case, Randgold managed to put this, of course, partnering with AngloGold. So they had to go in the region to build new roads and put up new power plants, hydropower dams, and do massive, resettlement programs for the communities, belt communities, pretty much creating a mini city from scratch. So those challenges were quite overwhelming. Having entered a region which was just coming from war, a lot of political instabilities. So, taking up a project like that is a huge and uphill battle. But surprising enough, through Mark Bristow's leadership, they managed to put it together and put all these infrastructures in place and built the company. And today everybody, when you look at the Kibali project, it's a marvel. It's a marvel. Yeah.
Why do you call the Randgold Barrick transition the merger of the century?
So it's a merger of a century in a lot of ways, and this somehow kind of coincided with a period when I was writing the book, and that's when I started this chapter. So when I researched on the mergers that had taken place in the past, I think at that time the Randgold Barrick merger was sitting at one of the most capitalized projects. It was sitting at about $24 billion. So in its scale, in that context, was actually very, very huge. But more importantly, it's the dynamics of the merger. So basically, Randgold was a small company in comparison to Barrick, but in a sense, it was more like a Randgold takeover of Barrick, because in the end, the leadership of Randgold actually took over the leadership of Barrick, and the reason is very clear. Randgold was well managed in terms of managing their finances. At the time of the merger, I think Randgold was sitting at a free cash of over $1 billion, $500 million, and in terms of managing the resources, our mines were well managed. In terms of debt management, also, I think Randgold was also excelling in that space. So I think the major was, from my understanding, the major was partly motivated in order to be able to have the management for Randgold to take over a big organization like Barrick and align it to that standard. So, which actually did happen. And immediately Mark Bristow took over the company. He quickly focused on trying to, ensure that Barrick became more profitable. Yeah.
As you have alluded to, Randgold was known for building obviously elite teams in Africa. How did Mark build these teams? And I suppose, was there a secret formula that he used to bring in good people and build these teams?
Yeah, so it's interesting enough when you talk about Randgold's strategy to build teams. So Mark Bristow's strategy was more focused on empowering, local people and local communities. So in a sense, he managed to galvanize together a team of, young engineers and, people from different backgrounds. But, the most challenging part was that as much as he was genuinely passionate about ensuring that the local people were empowered, the local people took over the management of these mines, there was a lack of skills at that point. And so in Mark's strategy, I think he managed to pull that together by, bringing in the local, nationals and workforce, and as well as international, highly experienced workforce, and then put them together and create a system in which the locals were, trained. Of course, the commitment for hiring the experts and highly professional people was to train the local people. And in a very short while, you would notice like an operation like the Lulo Gunkoto operation was pretty much sitting at 98% ownership in terms of management by the local people. So partly he brought in the experts to train the locals, and with time, the locals were up to speed to be able to run these operations. So, what's interesting is that Mark always advocated for local people to be able to carry on and manage his operations. So through that, he managed to galvanize a team of highly skilled people that were able to deliver on most of these projects. Of course, in terms of hiring, they looked at the best talents in Africa and, of course, across the globe. And then the advantage was always given to the local people for promotion in terms of course, it was merit based, and then also he rewarded his teams based on performance, which was quite encouraging and made the team more productive and more efficient in a lot of ways. But again, he believed also in the philosophy of continuous development for the people. And through all these, elements, we were able to build a very formidable team to run these mines. Yeah.
Randgold obviously had good relationships with governments and communities. How did they actually build that trust with obviously both government and the local communities in which they worked in?
So usually that's a very challenging subject because there are different litmus papers that people use. But from my experience working with Randgold, what I saw firsthand was that Mark Bristow advocated for honest communication, both with the employees as well as the government, and they worked with sort of an open book where government could see exactly what the company is doing, what sort of investment they've brought in the country, and what developmental projects they are pushing forward. So, in a sense, Mark really advocated for was very firm about contributing fairly to the government, And when governments saw this, I think it built their confidence, and the fact that he placed priority on employing the local communities, also that increased the confidence level for the company, and a focus on local supply chains. Those things also really made the people around to have confidence. Of course, that's mostly the government's interest to see that the cake of a company is being shared with everybody involved. And through that, and the level of transparency that existed in Randgold, it was only natural for governments to be able to build this trust for the company as well as the community in which they worked in. Yeah.
The last chapter of the book is called The Bright Side of Mining. What message do you want the global listeners and obviously listeners of this podcast to take away?
This is the most interesting part of the book, because if you look at the mining industry and mining at large, and the perception that the world has on mining, they all look at it as a business that just digs up holes and leave them abandoned, and they look at mining as pollution or environmental degradation. But if you step back a bit, if it wasn't for mining, we would definitely be maybe 5 centuries behind. And because of the contribution that mining has brought forward to our lives and to our communities, our society, you find that we've been able to achieve all these developmental and technological advancements that we see today. So I sort of took a step back to just sort of inform the larger audience and the globe at large on the importance of mining, so that it can receive a fair, judgment, and also perhaps we can take that opportunity to look at how best we can improve the mining industry in order for it to deliver in a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way. So in this chapter, I try to capture some of the benefits that mining brings to the world per se. So I've pointed out on technology, some of the infrastructure that we see around, the buildings that you see, the top buildings wouldn't exist had it not been for the steel that was mined somewhere. The cell phones that we carry today, they wouldn't have existed had it not been for mining. But again, we can also talk about agriculture. There's an interesting passage in the chapter where I try to kind of give an idea to the population, to the world, what would have happened had it not been for mining. We are sitting currently at over 8 billion people, but had it not been for mining, then we should have sat again and think of, out of the 8 billion people, because we will only be able to feed about 4 billion people. So we should be able to sit back and say, what are we going to do with the remaining 4 billion people? So definitely we have to annihilate them. But in this case, because of mining, that decision was made easy. So we could now produce more phosphate and all these fertilizers that you see, and then be able to feed the remaining 4 billion people. So you can see to what extent mining really contributes to the global community. So through this chapter, I took a step back and felt like I needed to inform the people about the benefits that mining brings to the global community. Of course, not overlooking some of the issues and challenges that we face in mining, but again, advocating for a more sustainable and environmentally friendly approach to mining.
Obviously, as we've been speaking, you worked worked for Randgold and Barrick under Mark Bristow. How did working inside those organisations and obviously working under Mark shape your own career as a CEO?
So the one thing that was interesting about Mark Bristow's leadership was that he did not confine us to our respective fields. So we were engineers, we were accountants, environmentalists, civil engineers, all sorts of skills came together. But in Mark Bristow's perception, he looked at it like you can be an accountant, but you needed to have an understanding of what really mining engineers are doing or what geologists are doing for us to form what was known as an integrated business plan. So he actually allowed, his teams to be exposed to different sections or parts of the business. So in my case, I'm a mining engineer by profession, and I had the opportunity through the company to be exposed to exploration, to finance, and how to, model the business in order for it to be profitable. I was also exposed to the supply chain, which was quite new to me because my focus at the beginning was just all these putting together all these engineered designs and putting together plans. But through Mark Bristow's leadership and his advocacy for an integrated kind of leadership in terms of his team, we were exposed to all sorts of value chain within the mining industry. So anybody who has worked for Randgold would be able to stand tall and firm and be able to interpret a cash flow or a business plan, because we were already exposed to that, and we had an interest in understanding how the business was run. So that was highly motivated by Mark in a sense. And so being an insider and growing up in Randgold, those are the massive benefits that I got, and it grew my career, it grew my exposure, and it grew my understanding, just like many would attest, of the entire mining business chain.
From those that will read the book, and hopefully a lot of our audience will be, what do you hope the mining industry, policymakers, maybe even young mining engineers, or even more mature engineers gain from reading the book?
So the book will give you an inside view of how Randgold built its business at the back of, based on the principles of remaining sustainable and also being aware of the environment, as well as protecting the interests of the communities. So when you look at that, when it comes to, say, the industry leaders in mining, what I would like them to take away from that is the quality of leadership that Mark Bristow and some of his top executives exhibited in order to build such a large company and make it profitable pretty much throughout its period for the last 3 decades or so. And in terms of the policymakers, I would like them to also sort of step back and look at how they can develop policy that encourages mining companies to mine sustainably and to be, committed to protecting the environment just as much as Randgold and Bristow looked at it. And then to the young engineers, of course, what's interesting is that through my story, you could pick 1 or 2 things that could inspire you to be able to build mines in the future. So I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from Mark Bristow is that, and I would like to remind our viewers or my audience to say, Mark Bristow was an African-born geologist, and he was genuinely passionate about Africa. And through his education, through his experience, through his dedication to the industry, he managed to build such a large empire. So to the young engineers, I would like them to also consider taking that path or that route where you look at Africa as a place with, which has been endowed with massive resources, but it's up to the young people to be able to take that mantle up and learn from a leader, our great leader like Mark Bristow, to be able to look at building similar, operations in the future. And with the technological advancement and all the, examples in our midst, I think it's something that is not far-fetched, but it's something that is reachable, and we can definitely get to that level.
Yeah. And lastly, if Mark was sitting here today, maybe he might have been on the podcast. What question would you ask him, and what would you think his answer would be?
So I'm sure you've been following what has been happening in the industry, and my question would be, because when I hear Mark talk and I see him on some of these platforms, I still see him as a man full of energy and full of knowledge to be able to give to the world. So I think my question to Mark would be, what unfinished business do you still see Africa's mining future? And what advice would you give to the next generation of African CEOs who are looking to be leaders like you? But of course, I would still expect Mark to be able to still remain in the leading role to develop more projects going forward, and also maybe to be on panels of different governments to advise them on how best they can exploit their resources for definitely the benefits of the larger populations. So more importantly would be, what are some of the unfinished businesses that you'd like to embark on and see that they go to fruition just as much as he did for both Randgold and Barrick. So what's interesting is that when he took over Barrick, it was sitting at $24 billion, and today it's sitting at the $6 billion market capitalization. So such a story is quite incredible and is quite inspiring. So we would like to know more about his future plans and some of the unfinished business that he would like to embark on, and to be nice to follow that story too.
Yeah, certainly. Elvis, really appreciate your time. Thank you for obviously sharing your story and sharing your insights, obviously working with Mark and then obviously documenting the journey. Obviously, the release of the book has just been released. So if our audience wants to purchase a copy, how can they go about doing that?
So copies will be available in different bookshops across the country. So definitely it's going to be Zambia and much of the Southern African region, South Africa and a couple of countries around that. Then for other people, I think it will be easily accessible through Amazon. So we will be able to share the link through your podcast, and people will be able to see how they can get themselves their hands on that. And I can definitely encourage people to get a copy, and definitely they won't regret it. I think they'll thank me later. Yeah.
Yes, certainly, certainly. Well, I'll include those details in the show notes. So there'll be the Amazon link, so people can purchase a copy, and hopefully they'll be listening to this podcast just before Christmas, because then obviously they can purchase that as a Christmas present for someone that they may know in the industry, or even just other people that may be interested in gold or interested in the mining industry. And if you can't get a copy before Christmas, then obviously please get one for or during 2026, because I think Elvis will. I think that obviously the book, as you've mentioned, has got a lot of insights from your obviously working with him, and a lot of golden nuggets that can be taken away, and a lot of learnings for people within our industry that they can take away and hopefully improve their own careers within our industry. And as I always say, this platform is all about educating our industry. So thank you again, Elvis. Hope the book goes well. And as I mentioned, hopefully a lot of our audience will purchase a copy.
Thank you very much, Rob. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And maybe you can come on next year and give us a update on the book, and anything, and maybe some feedback that you may have received from some of the readers that read the book and what lessons they may have learned. So we can speak again later next year.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you again for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. I do encourage you to purchase the book. Like I said, if you're listening to this before Christmas, encourage you to get a copy, maybe as a present to someone within the industry. But if not, if you do listen to this during the Christmas break or even later in January, then please, I encourage you to buy a book because it's a great story. Mark has been a veteran in our industry for over 30 years, has done so much for the people of Africa and for the gold industry and for mining in general. So there certainly is going to be some golden nuggets and some learnings from the book. So as always, appreciate your continued support. Please purchase a copy. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.